Welcome to my story so far with the CYC X1 Pro electric motor for converting regular bicycles into super powerful e-bikes. For those not in the know, the X1 is a mid-drive electric motor that can be run at power levels of up to 5 kilowatts, depending on the battery and control unit that it's paired with. This will be a summary of my first thoughts and experience installing and using the X1 Pro. CYC is still working on getting the final version of the package ready to ship to customers, and the controller firmware and phone app continue to be optimized. So I can't give a definitive review yet. That said, I have been using it for a while now in 2 different configurations on my bike, and I must have taken it on and off the bike at least 5 times, so I can at the very minimum give people my thoughts so far. I'm a long way from being done with this motor, and I have a lot more things that I want to try, but I'm also getting a lot of questions as to what I think. So I'm going to put as much information as I can in this video. If I missed anything or people have any questions or want any more information, just let me know. I'm going to start off right at the very beginning though with my thoughts on the installation. I've had this motor on 3 or 4 times now, so I'm getting pretty good at it. But I'd say it can be a little tricky to get it on the first time, mainly because of how you have to line it up. There's various spaces here that you have to get lined up along with the bottom bracket itself, and you have to hold a chunky motor in place on the frame in order to do it. So I think it's worth either using some blocking to put down there, or if you've got a mate that can help you to maybe hold the motor in place while you get everything through. I did find the mid frame install here much easier to do though, because you have the frame that you can use to assist you in holding the motor there. I'd like to see some better videos done on the install, maybe with a bit of commentary, and maybe when I do my next install on a different bike, I'll have a shot at doing some better quality ones. I don't think it's particularly more difficult to install than the BBSHD. Any DIY project really needs the 7 Ps in order to do a good job. So for anyone that doesn't know that, it's a British Army term, but it stands for proper planning and preparation prevents piss poor performance. And honestly, I've seen some real hatchet jobs of the BBSHD being installed and not properly torqued into place with horrendous chain line, and this kit's no different. If you're going to do it well, then you have to do the groundwork first. The reason for doing these videos is to provide help with people preparing to do such an install. But none of this is any substitute for your own research, and fortunately CYC are only too happy to help. In terms of install time, I mean, this current build here, getting it on after my sort of 4th go, it took probably 15 minutes and I wasn't rushing. But from a clean install, I think I probably took about an hour to get it up and running, and that was with the version where I had it installed underneath the bike. If I put the bike in the highest gear on the test rig I have, it comes out at 72 kilometers an hour. Once out on the road, you have rolling resistance and wind resistance to contend with. On my run downhill, the fastest road speed I've hit GPS verified is 69 kilometers an hour. On the flat, you can get up to around 60 kilometers an hour. Where I live, there are some pretty savage hills, and it will do those at between 35 and 50 kilometers an hour, depending on the hill. If the bike is already going when you get to the hill, it tends to keep going better than if you start on the hill and accelerate from there. And you definitely need to use the gears on your bike to get the most out of this motor, as the RPMs are maxing out at about 7,000 on the stock controller. If you stick an ASI controller on it with field weakening, the RPMs are going to jump along with the speed. And 72 volts is where the real speed increases are going to occur, with the RPMs hitting up to 12,000-ish. But as it stands, yeah, it's plenty fast for commuting around town. I get lots of questions as to how noisy the X1 is, so I'm going to try and show people with the limited resources that I have. It can't be a definitive or scientific test because I only have 2 bikes to work with, but mostly people want to know whether it's more noisy than a BBSHD. There are certain variables I can control, but it's just two bikes and my BBSHD is not stock, and it would probably be quieter if it was, because a motor running at 10,000 RPM is going to be noisier than one running at 7,000. Maybe my bike needs lubing, etc. as well. But I am using the same camera in the same position roughly on the bike in relation to the motors. I'm going to show the bikes on the same section of road. They will also be using the same 52 volt battery pack at roughly the same level of charge. But as I say, they are different bikes. They have different tyres on them. That being said, I'm going to show you clips of both of them on my testing rig and under some stress on a 9% hill. The pitch of the two motors are clearly different, with the BBSHD's more chunky design having a deeper tone than the higher pitch of the X1. But in terms of volume, there is really not that much difference, to my ears anyway. Maybe my BBSHD could use a regrease, as it does have a few thousand kilometers on it now. But at the end of the day, they are both e-bikes pushing 3 kilowatts of power. I'm not sure stealth is exactly the ticket here. A stock BBSHD would be a fair bit quieter than this though, with only 1.7 kilowatts max at 30 amps. Really, I reckon if being as quiet as possible is your goal, then lower power levels are probably the way to go. It's also worth mentioning that off-road, these bikes are going to be a little bit quieter because there's less noise coming from the surface. The motor itself is the best part of this package. It's got tons of power, even at the 52 volts that I'm running it at. It looks good on the bike, and I really like the way that you can see the windings through the glass. I think it looks modern and, more importantly, well made. It feels solid and composed of quality materials. I do like the silver colour, however the finalised version of this is going to be in black. I think that looks cool too. The silver ones might end up being kind of a collector's item down the road maybe. While I'm talking about motor quality, I should mention that several of the issues brought up when the Lunar guys took apart an early model have been resolved. I was a bit concerned myself with the gluing of the magnets and the balancing putty. The rotor that I have in my units has a casing on it that looks like this, and I've been informed that in future runs it's going to go back to just using the glue, but of a strength that has been tested to well over 12,000 RPM. Either way, it's going to be rock solid. The balancing putty, when I made inquiries about it, was apparently replaced with drilling quite some time ago. I'm pretty happy about that because Jackson managed to flick it off with very little effort in the original video, and I think that was an issue that could have affected the lifespan of the motor. In terms of pure looks, I think it's hands down one of the best looking e-bike motors out there. Other motors almost tend to try and blend in with the bike, but I think this one stands out and looks the part. It's quite compact in size, in the main part because of the spherical gears that it uses. This allows the gears to be thinner than in a gearbox with helical gears, which is one of the reasons why the BBSHD is such a chunky looking beast. Not that I don't think it looks good, because it does, but it's just more like it looks good in the way it's built like a tank, and the X1 looks more kind of aerospace in its style. I like the design of the controller, and I think it pairs well with the looks of the motor. Similar to the motor, it has been fully potted, so you don't have to worry about water ingress. The only weak spot was the wiring for the hall sensors, and that has been fixed for the final version with a waterproof connector. I much prefer it mounted in the location I have it on my bike, and it was certainly fun making the hardware to mount it. The more important part though is the programming, and at the moment I only have access to the Android beta app, so I can't use the functions that the iOS users get in terms of a display. But then I don't really like attaching my phone to my bike anyway, so that isn't a huge loss for me, but I know some people are going to like it when it's done. It is still at the moment a work in progress. I am working on my settings still, but I've not found it quite as easy as I would like to get settings that I do like. There are quite a lot of things to change, and there's definitely a bit of learning curve involved in getting things how you want them. I have a particular riding style that I've developed on my BBSHD and ASI setup, which I'm working on replicating as much as possible. I'm almost there, but not quite. Once I'm happy, I'm going to do a video going over how I've set my bike up, but it's a bit beyond the scope of this video to go into great detail on the settings. I would suggest to CYC that a really good set of instruction manuals is vital to get things running well. I do have a guide for the beta app with recommended settings and some description, but I think it could do a better job of explaining the range of input as well as calculations for how the different parameters interact with each other. I mean, if you compare this to my Egg Rider app and the way it interacts with the ASI controller, it's just one page. All you do is set the throttle max power and the PAS max power, and then it scales the power levels between the parameters you've set. I have seen a screenshot of the new app, and I'm told that it will be a simplified way of entering in the information for parameters with the final version. Going forward, CYC are going to offer 3 controller options. Their own native one that runs from 36 to 72 volts, I believe, and also the ASI BAC800 at 52 volts and the ASI BAC2000 at 72 volts. I think it's going to come down to choice. Do you want the features that come with the CYC app and controller, or do you want maybe the increased RPM and smoothness that you get with the ASI controllers? I'm thinking right now that I probably prefer the ASI, but perhaps that will change with the final version of the controller and app and with future firmware upgrades. At the end of the day, I think it's good that CYC are continuing to develop their own controller ecosystem, as well as offering other options. The more players there are driving innovation, the better, and it's only going to be good for the industry and the end user. I've been pretty happy with the motor's performance under throttle control. It's been great fun riding around. With the latest firmware, it definitely feels more snappy to me. I found it easy to start the bike on hills and from a stop. The power delivery is nice and rapid, and you can accelerate quickly to move with traffic in the city. I have no complaints, and seeing as how I ride throttle most of the time, that is a good thing. That said, it's not perfect, and what I would love to see is a silky smooth, really high quality throttle like the Domino offered in a half twist format. So let's see the add-ons start to really match the quality of the motors. I think PAS was part of the system that I had the most problems with. It's not a particularly good design, and this has been acknowledged as much by CYC. I discussed it in an earlier video I did, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the problems that I had here. I have zero interest in using my bikes for exercise, and I use PAS mainly as a way of navigating through slower areas of my town safely when it's busy. A quick spin of the pedals rather than balancing the high power on the throttle or changing the power levels via the display. But you can set it up to get some exercise if you wish. I just don't, because for me e-biking is about getting to places efficiently without looking and smelling like Chris Froome after a day at the Tour de France. PAS though is not going to be used going forward, as the final design is switching over to a torque sensing method, which is a much better system all round. That said, I haven't used it though, so I can't really tell you what it's like, but I am very much looking forward to giving it a try. Getting the chain line correct and being able to use the full range of gears was something that took me a long time to get right on my fat bike with the BBSHD. So it was very pleasing that from the moment I had the motor installed,
the chain line was bang on the centre of the rear cassette, and I was able to shift smoothly between the full range of gears. I really love the sound the motor makes as you shift between the gears. On a flat or downhill run, you can really pick up some speed fast and run through them all the way through to the top gear.
So for the display, you have 3 buttons here, and you push the middle one. It's a long press to power it on. Once it loads up, it gives you the odometer, and you can use the top and the bottom button to shift up and down the different power levels. If you push the middle button, it will change between the different modes. So if I push it once here, it takes me through to the mode. Now if I then do a long press on the top button, it will take me through to a different set of power levels, because you can have up to 3 different profiles. If I push then on the middle again, it gives you the RPM, and that's what I normally have it on, so I can see the motor speed. Just in case I'm in a busy area and it's kind of noisy and you can't hear the motor as well, it lets you know when it's kind of dipping down a bit, so you can shift down a gear and make it a bit easier on the motor. You also have, this is one the time you've been running it for. You have the current in amps, and you have the voltage of the battery, which is a little bit low for me at the moment. And a trip, so it'll tell you how far you've gone on your bike. And then to turn it off, it's a long press. As far as wiring goes on the bike, I've been doing my best, and I made my own holders here for the brake cutoff sensors, and I've tried to tidy it as well with a few of these smaller zip ties to keep the cable runs at the front down to just the 2 or the 3 coming off. I made this box here to tidy away the main harness, but this kit suffers just like the other kits. The harnesses are like twice as long as you'd need for even the biggest bike, and I think really we could do with a smaller version. And then if you have a really massive project, maybe make a specialized harness for that to go. But yeah, cable tidy, I'm happy with what I've done, but I think you're going to have to work at that yourself if you want to have a relatively clean looking bike.
So I'm not going to tell anyone what they should and shouldn't buy, because that's not my goal. These kits are not a simple stick it on your bike and go off riding deal. I think if that's what you want, then you're much better off buying a bike that's already been built and tested. There are a number of places that do this, and it's my firm hope that now this motor is reaching its final production iteration, that there will be more pre-built bikes based around this motor available to consumers to buy. If you are doing the DIY install method, then you need to be prepared to get your hands dirty and spend some time getting things running correctly. And the main reason I run my channel is to put out the kind of useful information that I was able to locate to help me with my first build. What I will say though is by getting this motor, you'll be getting something that's new and exciting. In terms of pure power, there are very few other options in the DIY market. In terms of looks, I think it's one of the best options. And in CYC, we have a company that is actively engaging with the DIY community and looking to improve all the time. I'm really excited to see where the DIY community can take this motor and the projects that will come from it. I do hope that the larger players like Luna will give the motor another chance, because for me, Bafang are obviously moving away from the DIY scene. They seem hell-bent on becoming another Bosch with stock offerings and the like, so I'm presuming that they will focus on making the same, for me, underpowered motors, albeit well-engineered, but maybe a bit cheaper, which is fine if you're okay with bikes just being mainly for exercise, leisure and slow travel. But I'm not fine with that though. I want to see these electric motors used to take trucks and cars off the road through the development of efficient and versatile light electric vehicles, and not just bikes either. Bafang for me clearly have no interest in further developing the BBSHD, and that for me is a crying shame. It's been down to third parties like Luna and ASI, along with operations like Electric Race Technologies and Electron Cycles, to push that envelope. But the BBSHD is aging fast, and even the upgraded metal gear that Luna produced, while clever, and I'll probably get one, is still just a band-aid. So surely a company like Luna would be better off with another motor to choose from, especially one that is being actively developed, one that has much greater versatility to mount it, and will have many more controller options available. So these are my thoughts and experiences so far, which may change depending on where I go with the system. I'm looking forward to using it with the ASI family of controllers, as well as with different bike frames. The pictures you're seeing now are of the final version that will be shipping if you get an order in now with CYC, or if you're waiting on one to ship with the 72-volt controller. I've found some of the parts, like PAS and controller programming, to be frustrating at times. But overall, I've been having a lot of fun because the motor itself is brilliant. It oozes power, even at the lower levels that I'm running it at, and it clearly has massive potential. And I hope that CYC continue to develop it and be active in the DIY community. As usual, if people have questions or suggestions, let me know in the comments. Cheers.